Hi, my name is Francis Schaeffer, and I come from a famous evangelical family of Christian leaders. My father was Francis Schaeffer, my mother Edith Schaeffer. And today I want to mention the fact that I left that background and somewhat fled my evangelical theology and right-wing politics that went with it. But you know something? I never abandoned the love your neighbor ethics that I was taught as a child and that my parents did their best to live out. And that's why I want to say something today and put it in terms that I was raised with as an evangelical Christian. It's time to abolish ICE in the name of Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. Standing in the White House, J.D. Vance said of Renee Nicole Good's killer, quote, "That guy is protected by absolute immunity," end quote. But here's who else got absolute immunity in Trump's America. Trump pardoned and commuted the prison sentences of all 1,500 plus people charged in violent crimes in the January 6, 2021 U.S. Capitol riot, including people convicted by video evidence of assaulting police officers and trying to kill them. Trump also pardoned former Honduran President Juan Orlando Hernandez, sentenced to prison on cocaine drug kingpin dealing distribution charges, a move that totally undercut his rationalization for an aggressive posture and kidnapping of the president of Venezuela. Trump was found liable for sexually abusing the writer Jean E. Carroll and said that he doesn't have to pay the $83 million he owes her for defaming her, because according to Trump, he too has absolute immunity. The Supreme Court also says Trump has absolute immunity and that his immunity extends to past sexual assault cases, his right to pardon drug dealers, Trump's right to enrich his family and friends, punish his critics, and have even his Republican critics threatened by his followers. Not to mention sending masked American military, nameless ICE agents into our streets to intimidate his critics and entire blue states. So J.D. Vance's assertion that ICE agent Jonathan Ross has, quote, absolute immunity is being widely criticized by both Democrat and Republican legal experts, who are all stating that officers of the law are not entitled to such immunity. This applies only to judges and prosecutors at times in American law and jurisprudence, to no one else. It's easier to destroy a social order than to build one. That's what we're learning. A great wave of savagery has been released, foreign and domestic. And if you think foreign policy ideals were discarded by the Iraq War that my son fought in, who was in the Marine Corps, as he fought in Afghanistan, by the way, and was honorably discharged, how do you like Trump's world without them? Invade Greenland? Destroy NATO? Side with Putin? Why not? Like Trump and J.D. Vance, he claims absolute immunity to murder people everywhere in the world, and he hates democracy too. Pardon any ICE killer for any killing in Trump's name? Where are we headed? Humankind has been able to reconstitute new social orders after other periods of savagery like the one we're in now. After the 17th century wars of religion, after the 20th century world wars, civilization was rebuilt, including the European Union that has kept the peace for decades that you and I have lived through. Now, that task of reconstituting our lives from the savagery that surrounds us is ours again, and everybody who is active in community and public life has a role. And we face a threat to our civic order as never before. For instance, 10 minutes into the news conference in which Trump celebrated the strike operation to abduct Venezuela's president, Trump started rambling about his use of American military troops patrolling the streets of American cities. Quote, "I just have to congratulate our military," Trump said. the job they have done, whether it's in Washington, D.C., where we have a totally safe city, where it was once one of the most unsafe cities anywhere in the world, frankly, and now we have no crime in Washington, D.C., end quote, which, by the way, was not true. Trump's rants might seem like the sleepy mumblings of the oldest man ever to sit in the presidency, but his glee about domestic military deployments and violence crystallizes the most chilling hallmark of Trump's and Vance's term. Trump's militarized, oppressive domestic policy, denying America's constitutional system of government to assume virtually boundless, unchecked power to intimidate, bully, and now even kill ordinary citizens like you and me. Trump's second term has been marked by aggressive threats and military violence against individual American citizens taken without informing Congress, much less seeking its approval in advance. Masked, half-trained gunmen now roam our streets and threaten American citizens as well as immigrants on our streets with impunity. Take the violence against Good. A video from the killer's angle now shows Good's last words were caught on camera, and these were her last words. "I'm not mad at you." And guess what the agent says in return? "Fucking bitch." Trump could not have said it better. Piggy, ugly, terrible person. Those are the terms Trump uses to describe women when not bragging about grabbing them by the pussy, to use his words. And Trump has consistently ramped up attacks on women in the White House press corps. Now Trump's most recent statement suggests that immigration officers yelling "fucking bitch" at an American woman they are about to kill are now free to act without fear of accountability. Other video recordings of the Minneapolis shooting show Good telling the officer, "I'm not mad at you," as I just said, then moving her SUV toward him before turning away and trying to escape. The vehicle appears to clip him as he opens fire. Within hours of the incident, before investigators had reached any conclusion, Trump posted online that Good ran over the ICE officer, which anybody with eyes can see is simply not true. But Trump's message and Vance's message is, don't trust your lying eyes, trust us. Kristi Noem, the Homeland Security Secretary, so-called, accused Good of domestic terrorism and labeled the administration as fighting terrorists when they killed her. And she used this to justify cracking down on political opponents as well, as DHS spokesman blamed, quote, rioters, even though the recordings show no riot and no evidence of a riot, unlike the January 6th actual riot, where thousands of Trump supporters stormed our own Capitol, smashed windows, and tried to kill policemen. Trump threatens, and his goons respond with death threats. For instance, the relationship between Trump and former Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene grew so poisonous recently that the congressman faced everything from, she says, swatting to pipe bomb threats, underscoring the ferocity of Trump's threats linked to her via his goons. And the Capitol Police, by the way, the same ones attacked on January 6th, reported a sharp rise in threats against her and other lawmakers who dare oppose Trump. Okay, so Trump is vain and petty, but it's folly to assume the demands of his ego will be satisfied by a few symbolic threats and a few killings of random Americans. After all, and this is important, Trump admires Putin. Putin's approach to politics and ruling involves applying, quote, anti-terrorism laws to target political opposition and civil society. For instance, Putin has long, well-known history of using major terrorist attacks such as the 1999 apartment bombings and the 2004 Beslan school siege to implement sweeping anti-terrorism laws that restrict civil liberties wholesale and consolidate Kremlin control. And international observers have long said that these, quote, terror attacks were probably staged themselves anyway by Putin's security forces. The Russian government has also passed laws that effectively equate all dissent with terrorism in the same way that J.D. Vance and Donald Trump and our Homeland Security now are doing in the lies they tell about ordinary Americans who oppose them. In other words, anybody who opposes Trump on anything or disagrees with him, as Marjorie Taylor Greene has found out, is, quote, a terrorist. Putin's own version of ICE, his security services, FSB, have focused resources on harassing and persecuting political enemies and anti-war activists. The state-controlled media in Russia and government officials use propaganda to frame internal opposition and external adversaries, like Ukraine, as existential terrorist threats to Russia's survival, just as J.D. Vance calls all Americans who oppose Trump for any reason terrorists. In other words, Stephen Miller is getting his way, and Trump, Miller, Vance's way is Putin's and the FSB way. And here's that way: militarized and, when needful, killing of citizens to keep power. Miller demands progress reports on his mass deportation campaign and issues orders to federal enforcement agencies, including the FBI, CBP, ICE, HHS, and DOD, and in Trump's inner circle, even with the president himself, Miller is known as the dogmatic force whose ideas are too extreme for public consumption and never honestly stated, so have to be carried on under a rubric of lies. Echoing Putin, Miller has tried to recast the nation's partisan political disagreements as an existential threat to America and a conflict battling the forces of wickedness and evil, as he calls everyone who disagrees with Trump on anything, against the nation's noble, virtuous people, a crowd that Miller says traces its lineage and legacy, in Miller's actual words, quote, back to Athens, to Rome, to Philadelphia, to Monticello. And Miller is weirdly right. Rome is an apt reference for Trump and Vance's and their tech bro supporters' power grab. So now we American citizens of all political and religious persuasions confront a tyranny unprecedented in our modern history. The replacement of the rule of law and the rule of the people with the dominion and domination of one man and his wealthiest and most corrupt friends and his chosen heir, Vance, and Vance's tech bro, lords and masters. Trump has spoken of being a dictator jokingly and signed off on social media posts with references to himself as a, quote, king. And J.D. Vance is all in on this as he chases power at whatever cost. Just this week, Trump told the New York Times during a wide-ranging interview that he alone is the arbiter of his authority as commander-in-chief. He brushed aside the law and other checks, like the U.S. Constitution, on his power to order the U.S. military to strike or invade nations around the world or kill Americans, arrest them, or deport them. When asked if there were any limits on his powers, Trump said, yeah, quote, I'm quoting him, yeah, there is one thing, my own morality, my own mind. It's the only thing that can stop me, end quote. In other words, Trump has absolute immunity from the law, from God, and from Christian or any other overarching moral code. Speaking of Rome, author and leading historian of the Roman Empire, Tom Holland, best known for his co-hosting the popular The Rest is History podcast, recently noted that Caesars have a strong resonance in the reign of Trump, as he put it. Their whims and egos once also governed the lives of millions and meted out threats and death to critics. Holland said, quote, I am watching the U.S. enthusiastically leap into an authoritarian regime, end quote. There is a parallel between ancient Rome and America's modern republic that has resonance. It's not just the story of how flagrantly the emperors of Rome flaunted their rule, but rather the process through which the emperors came to power in the first place. For those who cherish the promise of America's democracy, it is the fall of Rome's Republican experiment that, as Tom Holland tells us, provides the clearest parallels. A Roman imperial order emerged and was attenuated by wealth and power of the very kind J.D. Vance worships as he caters to his billionaire masters like Peter Thiel and Elon Musk with his Grok AI child porn generating slime that he's purveying to the world and laughing off as a kind of a joke. In Rome, political power was controlled by the wealthiest also and dominated politically, economically, and socially, mostly by men, and always the wealthiest men, as has now happened in America. As the next emperor with absolute immunity from the law, J.D. Vance has established a network of influential tech billionaires and investors which have directed his political ascent so far. His closest friends in the tech world include Peter Thiel, prominent tech investor and entrepreneur who has been a key supporter of Vance's political ambitions and has been pushing for genetic re-engineering of the human race and embryo destruction, so much for pro-life America, so perfect babies can be bred. David Sachs, an entrepreneur and podcaster who has transitioned from being a Trump skeptic to a staunch supporter by 2020, and many others. Elon Musk, leading the charge to support Trump Vance alongside Tucker Carlson, has embraced Tucker Carlson's anti-Semitic friends through silence, if nothing else. These connections have not only provided financial backing for Vance's campaigns, but have also helped him build rapport with other wealthy donors on social media, influencing his political future. During Trump's second term, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement officers have been handed a powerful new tool by J.D. Vance's tech bro collaborators to speed up arrests, mobile facial recognition technology, amongst other things. Now, what began as a Democratic talking point focused on Vance's ties to Palantir, that's the company that had a co-founder, Peter Thiel, who mentored Vance early in his career and poured $15 million into his 2022 Senate run, has now become a source of tension even within Trump's own political coalition. Several prominent conservative figures, including Steve Bannon, Joe Rogan, and Roger Stone, have expressed unease about Palantir's growing footprint in federal agencies. Stone even said he warned Vance directly that his, quote, and I'm quoting, biggest fear for the country is Palantir, citing concerns about futuristic large-scale government surveillance. So we can imagine a future where perhaps ICE killings will be planned and targeted using large-scale government surveillance. The threat of these, quote, absolute immunity killings, as I think of them, in favor of the tech bro community's power may happen unless the militarization of American life is halted. You think that's far-fetched? Look where we are now. J.D. Vance will continue Trump's use of force and threats of force to intimidate voters to back his tech bro Tucker Carlson, Elon Musk-led ticket. Watching the Trump, Vance, Thiel, Musk, and their ICE allies blow past what once seemed like impregnable safeguards of American democracy these days, I know what these new Romans believe is their due. And here's what they believe they are owed: absolute immunity from the rule of law or any limit to their wealth. There is a lot we don't know about the shooting of Renee Nicole Good, but of course we'll never find out because the federal government has stepped in and said no one can investigate this but them. And the investigation's already been concluded. She's been declared a terrorist. Over. Game over. Don't need to investigate anything. Don't believe your lying eyes. Don't believe the videos. Believe us. That's what they say. She was killed by masked federal intimidators deployed in Minnesota, but in the chaotic aftermath of the shooting, one thing is clear. The Vance-Trump administration is lying about what happened. We know that because we can see the videos. Shortly after news began circulating about Good's shooting, the Department of Homeland Security spokesman, Teresa McLaughlin, said in a statement on X that, quote, and I'm quoting her, rioters began blocking ICE officers, and one of these violent rioters, mother of three, sitting in her car, weaponized her vehicle, attempting, I'm quoting again, to run over law enforcement officers in an attempt to kill them. An act of domestic terrorism, end quote. DHS Secretary Kristi Noem and the White House advisor Stephen Miller also described the incident as, quote, domestic terrorism, while President Trump posted on his social network that Good, quote, ran over the ICE officer. Videos of the incident taken by bystanders show every element of Trump's and Miller and Vance's statements to be outright lies. There were no riots at the scene, and no rioters. The vehicle appears to be driving away from the armed federal agents, not toward them, and no one was run over. And there is no evidence that terrorism of any kind was involved. After the shooting, federal agents then prevented a bystander who identified himself as a doctor from attending to Good. Quote, "They are already trying to spin this as an action of self-defense," Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey told reporters. "Having seen the video myself, I want to tell everybody directly, that is bullshit." Vance and Trump said she deserved it. "Do you think this officer was wrong defending his life against a deranged leftist who tried to run him over?" Vance posted this, echoing Trump saying the same thing about Rob Reiner, who, according to Trump, deserved to be killed because, in Trump's own words, quote, "He was known to have driven people crazy by his raging obsession of President Donald J. Trump, with his obvious paranoia reaching new heights as the Trump administration surpassed all goals and expectations of greatness, and with the golden age of America upon us perhaps like never before," end quote. Administration officials' indifference to the facts, to due process, to the dignity of the deceased, and to basic human decency is, indeed, Roman. They proceeded to make dishonest statements that they know will be contradicted by the video evidence available to anyone with eyes to see it. They don't care, no more than the Roman emperors did. Pre-Christian Rome, that is. The message of our rulers is not that the least of these matter, and we should pay attention to the weak, say a mother of 3 driving in a car. But do not believe your lying eyes, believe us, or suffer the consequences. The Trump, Vance, Musk, Thiel federal government now speaks with the voice of a citizen-hating smear machine, partisan, dishonest, and devoted to vilifying Trump's perceived enemies rather than informing the public, ever. Good's mother, partner, and children have to cope not only with their unfathomable loss, but with a campaign designed to justify her killing. Their own lives will be subject to invasion and scrutiny and terror by the government and its allies in search for any derogatory information they can dig up about Good that might somehow be used to justify her murder. For Trump's goons, that won't be too extreme. Quote, "I do not feel bad for the woman that was involved," the Republican lawmaker Randy Fine told the right-wing network Newsmax. The Trump smear machine that Trump, Vance, Musk use, of course, is quite familiar to the kind of people who lived in communities in Syria under Assad, who live in Iran right now, or who lived in Venezuela, or for that matter, any woman today that objects to Musk's grok, jokey trashing of her reputation with fake porn based on her pictures that have been dealing with abuses in this way. Taking Good's life wasn't enough. The moment she died, it became imperative for the administration to also destroy her memory. For many months, masked agents of ICE have been snatching Americans as well as others off the streets and meting out brutal punishment to those who get in their way. American citizen George Reddy's is a 25-year-old U.S. Army veteran who served a tour in Iraq on July 10 while on his way to work as a security guard at a Southern California farm. He was detained by federal immigration agents despite telling them that he is an American citizen and that his wallet and identification were in his nearby car. Reddy's said that while they were arresting him, the agents knelt on his back and his neck, and he said it made it difficult for him to breathe. Held in jail for 3 days and nights, he was not allowed to make a phone call, see an attorney, appear before a judge, or take a shower or wash the pepper spray and tear gas that the agents had used on him out of his eyes, according to the Institute for Justice, a public interest law firm that is representing Reddy's. He worried about his 2 young children and missed his daughter's 3rd birthday party. This is the family values that J.D. Vance subscribes to. I guess because he even told his story, he'll be called a terrorist too, maybe targeted. This is just the first taste of what will happen when Trump, Vance, Musk, Thiel's, and Miller's private AI-powered militia takes to the streets with lists provided by Vance's tech bro backers of those to be intimidated, deported, or killed with absolute immunity. Think that's far-fetched? Where are we now? Of course, what these assaults, domestic and foreign, will have in common is the drive for power, free of challenge or restraint, of ego or billionaire greed, and an absolute egomaniacal desire to not be regulated. Whether it's sending special forces to Caracas or ordering the National Guard into Los Angeles and Washington, D.C., the Trump, Vance, Musk, Thiel goal is control, greed, and power at any price. And when tech greed and power is AI-backed quest to make Vance president, then the full force of tech power will be unleashed. Under Vance, we will find that American citizens have only one right, and that is to be silent and to be afraid. And here's the irony. The first people Vance, Thiel, Carlson, Musk, and the other new Roman emperors will target are, in fact, the MAGA faithful, pro-lifers included, and believing evangelicals and others. For instance, Carlson has already said he hates evangelical Christians who believe that Jesus' return depends on the existence of the state of Israel. These so-called Christian Zionists are people he's targeted for disdain. And the tech bros like Peter Thiel are into the very genetic engineering that results in the killing of thousands of human embryos in their quest for a master race, and the using of surrogate mothers to breed them hundreds of children, as one Chinese billionaire has already done. And former Republican Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia has cited an escalating number of threats she's gotten since she's begun criticizing Trump for not releasing the Epstein files honestly, and since then for saying that as a follower of Jesus Christ, she could not go along with Trump's contradicting Charlie Kirk's widow, who was forgiving Charlie's murder and said instead that he hated his enemies and that was what he lived by. And Greene has tied the many threats directly to Trump's rhetoric, in which Trump has labeled her a traitor for trying to follow Jesus Christ instead of him when it comes to forgiving enemies. Greene said Trump's lies about her, quote, put my life in danger, and so she says she wrote to J.D. Vance and begged for his help, but he didn't offer to help her at all. And this turn against evangelical Christians who forgive, or against evangelical Zionists, or those demanding an honest accounting of Trump's decades-long involvement with a famous worldwide serial child molester, is just the first taste of what even Trump's former true believers will face from Vance and his private ICE army backed by Palantir's domestic intel gathering apparatus. As Palantir's slogan threatens on their very own website, quote, our software powers real-time AI-driven decisions in critical environment and commercial enterprises in the West, from the factory floor to the front lines of ICE agents in the future against our own people. There is an alternative to our future controlled by these soulless, power-grabbing would-be emperors like J.D. Vance and his billionaire backers like Musk and Thiel. And that better future is the one I describe in my new book, The Gospel of Zip. Here's a passage that not long ago all Americans would have agreed to, including my MAGA friends. And I do have MAGA friends. And I hope we reject Vance and his tech emperors while we still can and embrace once again what I describe in my book right here. And I'll read you this passage. It's short, don't worry. This is from my book, The Gospel of Zip. This is the only way we all secretly wish our world actually was. A place filled with people, ruled by the ethic of love, filled with optimistic faith in humanity and our future, embracing forgiveness, thankful for every instance of redemption, avoiding political extremism, promoting personal responsibility, and working to strengthen our communities. So maybe it's time that every American who agrees with the beliefs I just read from my book, The Gospel of Zip, which, by the way, is on YouTube at thegospelofzip.com for free. I read all 8 hours out loud, so you don't have to buy it, although it would be a nice thing if you did buy it from Amazon from once in a while and give it a review. But that said, I just read from this book, The Gospel of Zip, and I stand up for the freedom to love others as we love ourselves. That's the message of my book. And that freedom to love is the theme of my book and used to be what most Americans, Black, white, Native American, Christian, atheist, Jew, Muslim, believed was right, good, and righteous. These days, love of neighbor is called by Trump and Vance terrorism. Like the Romans before them, Vance and Trump and their tech bro backers have declared love a form of terror and treason. My name is Frank Schaeffer.